Hello everybody, welcome back. The crazy one right there running around is Freya, my fuzzy little co-star, and I'm Jason. I'm bringing you today's video. So today I want to talk about some new research that I was just reading about the other day related to, of course, autism. That's what we like to talk about here. And it's fairly interesting. So as we've already covered in some of the other videos, they don't know exactly what causes autism. Their most likely guess is it's a variety, a multitude of factors, especially since it's such a broad spectrum, but there's a multitude of factors. Genetics is a very, very, very high likelihood one, most likely, the most likely cause of autism, or at least a contributing factor. And the reason for that, the reason they know that is because not just is there a much higher probability of autism in a child that has a sibling that is on the spectrum, but that could be attributed potentially to environmental issues as well. And environmental issues are one of the things that they do look at as a potential contributing factor as well, just not as high a level as genetics, but also a parent or grandparent that is on the spectrum significantly increases the likelihood, the percentage likelihood of the child being autistic as well. So they know that there is a genetic factor. There's absolutely a genetic factor. Now, while we do not know exactly what causes autism, we do know some things that 100% absolutely do not cause autism. And that's a lot of the conspiracy theories that have been out there. But as far as what does cause autism, again, we do not know. But there's been a lot of research into it, and there continues to be research into it, mostly privately funded. As we've talked about before, there are zero federal programs for adults that are autistic, and it is the #1 learning and developmental disability in the United States, the fastest growing, and yet is the least funded of them all. Most of the research is private, as we've talked about in the past, and that's unfortunate because something else we've talked about in the past is the expense of it. How much more raising an autistic child costs versus a non-autistic child. The difference is astonishing. The yearly difference is absolutely astonishing. It costs so much more. And that can also extend into adulthood. Autism doesn't stop causing issues as people get older. Some of us, I should say, can smooth out those issues, masking, things along those lines, but doesn't entirely go away. But this new company has created a test that does not definitively diagnose or for or against, I should say, autism, but it does give a pretty good idea, I should say. They've devised a test that has a very, very high success rate for pinpointing autism, and it's via hair. They've actually found a test or a company, LinusBio, I don't know how to pronounce it, but LINUSBIO, if you want to read up on it, just Google it, and Google the company and autism or autism test. And it's fairly interesting because obviously the genetic markers aren't as likely to show up in hair. Well, aren't going to show up in hair unless you pulled the root and got some DNA out of it. So, and they don't know what the genetic markers would be for autism. So now they're looking at the contributing environmental factors, and the ones that stood out for them through their studies, through their tests, as they were devising this hair test, is actually metals and heavy metals, and through their research they managed to find the mix that more often than not points to an autistic diagnosis or an autistic child. Now again, this test cannot by itself diagnose. It cannot, and it is not intended to diagnose. Even within their test subjects, they only had, I think, an 86% success rate with this hair test, and they anticipate that if they put it out into a broader population, that success rate is likely to drop a little bit because, as we know, not everybody that's on the spectrum do we realize is on the spectrum. People don't realize that I'm on the spectrum. Well, almost nobody realizes that I'm on the spectrum. So we don't always know that somebody's on the spectrum. It's too wide of a spectrum. So when they have this control group, these study groups, that they absolutely know, it was a lot easier for them. So, you know, to I guess calibrate their tests, I should say. And whereas if we use it out in the broader population, well, there's going to be a whole lot of either false positives or false negatives, or at least what we would think is a false positive is false negative. And it could very well be pop a positive on somebody that is very barely on the spectrum and masks it very well, so absolutely nobody knows, so they think it's a false positive. Or, of course, you get the false negatives. So, again, it's not going to be a perfect test, and it's not intended to. Because you have to remember, too, right now, statistics say 1 in 44 Americans are on the autism spectrum. However, you just go back a few years, and they would have said 1 in 150. Go back a few years past that, 1 in 300. And you just keep going back, and they would say less and less and less of a percentage of the population would be on that spectrum. And we just have to just go back to when they started calling it a spectrum. If we went back prior to that, well, we still did have the term autism and have an idea of what it was. When it wasn't a spectrum yet, it was a much, much smaller percentage of the population. And again, as we've said in the past, autism has not grown. Like more people aren't getting diagnosed with autism. Well, more people are getting diagnosed with autism. More people aren't being born autistic now than before. We've just gotten better at identifying it. So that 1 in 150 that's now 1 in 44, it's not because 3 times as many people are being born autistic. It's because we've gotten 3 times better at diagnosing it, which means that this test, even if it would be theoretically at 100% accuracy, we wouldn't realize it. Again, we would have what we would consider to be false positives because we didn't realize these people are autistic, because we're getting better and better and better at it. So their intent behind this test is to help identify potential children. This test is not designed for adults. There's just so many other ways to diagnose older children, toddlers, older children. This test is for infants or pre-toddlers. I don't know what the term might be. Still infant. I don't know. Basically, because right now the average age for an autism diagnosis is 4. All right. Typically, they're diagnosed at 4. And the reason for that is because a lot of the markers, a lot of the behavioral things that we would see in an autistic child is impossible to notice prior to that age. You can't tell with a 6-month-old whether or not they, you can't say, they like to point at things or not point at things. You can't say with a 2-month-old that, they don't like to make eye contact. Even a 1-year-old, you don't really see what they're walking. You don't really start socializing them until they start having some more language, and they may be delayed language syndrome, or some autistics don't have problems developing in language. They develop just fine. They're not behind anything like that. So it takes a little while. It takes a little while until there's enough behavior, until they've learned enough and matured enough behaviorally to be able to identify those behavioral markers that would signify autism. But with this hair test, theoretically, they could give an infant the hair test and then say, okay, well, there's a high probability that this child will be on the spectrum. And if we can get those markers early enough, if we can get those signs early enough, or at least something that says, hey, let's evaluate. Because there are professionals out there that can evaluate younger than 4. It's just they never see the children because it takes, again, till 3, 4, 5 years old before the parents see enough markers that it's just odd enough, or maybe a teacher or somebody that's on the outside, a teacher, a family friend, something along those lines says, have you thought about getting them checked? That's when it happens. But now with this hair test, now the parents could say, well, let's have them evaluated. Let's have them evaluated at 6 months. Because with children, the earlier we can intervene, the earlier we can begin either ABA, applied behavioral analysis, or basically behavioral therapy, or just awareness of the potential autism, and then diagnose it. The earlier we can diagnose it, the better off the autistic child is, almost 100% of the time. The earlier that we can intervene, the better off they will be. The more progress they make, the more they are able to adjust, mask, learn behaviors. So this test could be pretty key. It could be very, very, very key. So if you guys are interested more into it, just check out. If I can, I'll put in the links down below. I know I already put a bunch of other links down below for some charities and stuff like that for autism. But if I can find the link again to the article, I'll put the link down below. If not, like I said, LinusBio, and their autism hair test. Check it out. It's pretty interesting stuff. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll catch you next time. Bye now.